Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Galit Speaks podcast. I'm super excited that Jess Lynn is here again today so we can continue our conversation about polyamory. Let me tell you a little bit about Jess. Jess is a licensed therapist, clinical social worker, and ethical non-monogamy relationship coach. After opening her previously monogamous relationship of 6 years, Jess quickly learned just how little information there was out there from professionals on how to navigate non-monogamy. Jess is passionate about helping others and taking steps to design and embrace their relationships' dreams. She shares her knowledge and personal stories through the lens of a trained clinician and hopes others can reach relationship success. Thank you so much for being here for part two. I'm super excited.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's so weird to hear someone like read about you. I'm just like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I always think that. I'm like, oh, I've done all of those things
Yeah.
and I'm that person. So
Yeah, it's
I
weird.
can totally understand how it'd be a little bit weird. But so the last time we were on, we talked a little bit about the different types of ethical non-monogamy and polyamory. And since, give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Sorry, anyone who's watching this live. There is like construction going on in my house. I just have to open my door. I will be right back. It's open. I'm just on a podcast. Sorry about that.
We're fine.
Yeah, okay. So we talked a little bit about the different types. We didn't get super deep into it. Are you available to go deeper?
Whatever you want to talk about, I'm totally about it. Yeah, for sure.
I feel like I've been priming for this interview for a while now. I've been watching a lot of TikTok.
Yeah.
Do you follow Polyfam
Yes.
on TikTok?
I'm not
How do you feel?
I will say I'm not a TikToker, but I follow them on Instagram. Yeah, I love them. There's several like really good creators that I follow on Instagram, and I just like find it so, I don't know. There's another one that's like really funny. They're called the Poly Couple. Their like handle is Dana and the Wolf. I think the boyfriend's name is Wolf. Last name is Wolf. But they're so funny. They just like, I love how we're getting so many more creators that are like, making public like some of the funniest and like also most difficult parts of all of this. Because like this is people's real lives, apart from like all of the literature and like all that kind of stuff that you read. So yeah, it's really funny to read and watch all these things.
I know. And I was like watching a video of Polyfam today, and it was a video came up where like he was trying to separate socks and figure out who the socks
Oh
belong
yes.
to in the polycule.
Yeah, it was like
And I was just like,
there's like a
I feel like
bucket
this
that
is
says
relatable.
mine, and then there's like my wife's, and then like he picks up the sock and he's like, and he puts it in one of them, and then the wife comes or whatever and is like, no, that's my wife's girlfriend's sock. So yeah, that's like, yeah, that's absolutely like real life relatable. And a lot of the poly couples are like that too. One of their recent videos was um something like, it was kind of like around misconceptions of non-monogamy, and this guy had gone on a date with the woman of the couple and then came back to his friend and was like, hey, so I met this woman, she's so great, but she's polyamorous. And then the friend is like, okay, so does she have another partner? And he's like, yeah, she has a partner, his name is Daniel. And he's like, so does that mean you have to be gay? And he's like, I don't know. And it's just like so funny because like these things do really, like, people don't know what they don't know, right? Which is like not their fault. And that's like why I do what I do, because like, no, polyamory does not mean that you have to be with all of those people. Just because she has another partner doesn't mean you have to be with them too. But it's just so funny to see some of these, like you said, the laundry thing. Like, we do that at my house all the time. Like, we don't do a ton of my other partner's laundry, but sometimes like he'll leave stuff here and then my husband will be sorting it and be like, wait, is this, I don't, these aren't my socks, I don't think I have socks like this. And I'm like, no, those are his. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. What should I do with them? Like, where should I put them? I'm like, just make a pile and I'll give it to you. It's just funny.
Yeah, and I feel like it also like bridges the gap for other people because that's just a relatable thing to happen in households in general.
Yes.
Like siblings laundry always gets mixed and it kind of makes you feel like, oh, like they're just normal people. Like these are normal people doing normal everyday things. It's not some like weird cult.
No. It happens with dishes also, especially with Tupperware. Like if I bring something from my partner's house here, I think it was a couple weeks ago, my husband was like unloading the dishwasher and he was like, where did we get, like, this isn't ours. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I didn't see it, but I was just like, it must be ours. It's in our dishwasher. And he was like, no, we don't own this kind of Tupperware. We only own this brand. And I was like, what do you, oh yeah, that's my partner's. And he's like, oh, okay. And then one other time I brought home like literally just the Tupperware container without a lid and a spoon because I was literally eating Cheerios in the car driving to work from his house and it's a distance. So I was like, I got to eat something. So he's like, where did the spoon come from, huh? And I'm like, what do you mean? Where? I don't know. Where do spoons come from? Like, and he was like, no, this isn't our spoon. And I'm like, what? Oh yeah, though that's his. And he's like, what? Why did you? Okay, never mind. Just whatever. We'll just give it back. So yeah, it's a very like, these are very normal. Like I can't say I'm a normal person. That would be probably like over exaggerating. But like we have normal person, like everyday things like that happen where we're like, who does this belong to? So yeah, no, I agree. It's funny.
Yeah, I love that it's becoming a little bit more open because I feel like before this time period, right, there were things like this happening, but it was always behind closed doors and it was usually really the only time I really heard about it was swingers. And that was like some crazy parties and putting car keys in a dish or like
I've definitely heard that one before.
Yeah, so like this takes it into like a different realm that other people can understand like, oh, these are relationships, they're normal relationships or abnormal relationships, but they're still
unconventional is the word I like to use.
Unconventional. Yes, that's a much better word because they can feel very normal and like super healthy.
Yeah, it's funny because, I also think, of course, like I am not a swinger, so I can't speak to that. But like, I think there's like so many misconceptions about all kinds of forms of non-monogamy. Like this whole like put your keys in a bowl situation. Like I've never actually seen that happen. But yeah, I think with polyamory, like in my own life, like I was just before our broadcast here, I was with my husband at a local brewery and we were talking about my birthday, which is next month. And like to strangers, we're like, oh, they were new to the place. We're like, oh, we love this place. Like so much so that I'm actually having my birthday here. And they're like, oh, what are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I don't know anything. He and my other partner are like, coordinating everything. And they personally did not like skip a beat. But sometimes people are like, what? Like, do you mean your business partner? Like, what do you, like, that's the term that people like when I'm clearly standing with this man who this couple is getting married and we happen to have the same wedding anniversary. So I was telling them that. So they know we're married. And then I say my other partner and I, and they didn't say anything. They were younger, but I've gotten some like, huh? Wait, aren't you? What's going on here? And to me, it's like, I realize this is unconventional and it really just does feel like a normal, like it's part of my everyday life. Like, this is not that strange to me. So yeah, sometimes you also forget that like other people aren't necessarily like aware of all these things. So
Yeah, and definitely don't consider it average,
oh
right?
yeah,
Because
no.
you'll get like crazy different responses,
Oh yeah.
right? There will be some responses that are like, "Oh, that's so cool. How
Yeah.
can I do this?" And
Yes.
then you'll get responses that are like, "Oh, I could never.
Oh yeah.
That sounds horrible."
I always
Or
say
what do
that.
you mean?
Exactly. I always say, I keep joking about this and I should just do it already, that I'm going to make a bingo card. Like, you know how in like the pandemic, people are like, well, that wasn't on my 2020 bingo card. I feel like I'm going to make a bingo card of like people's responses when you tell them that you're polyamorous or non-monogamous. Because yeah, I have gotten from some people like, oh my God, what? Like, that's so great. Good for you. And then I've also gotten the like question mark face where like they want to ask a question, but they don't, like they're afraid to be wrong about what you said. And then I get the exactly like you said, I could never, or don't you get jealous, or do you not get jealous, or all manner of those kind of things. So yeah, you really get, depending on who you're talking to, you get the whole gamut of responses. It's really interesting for sure.
Yeah, and so I know that a lot of people don't like to live like this, but I, in general, try to live very much authentically and not hide things.
Yeah.
Um, how do you know who to tell, who not to tell, what situations merit discretion?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a hard one, and people ask me that a lot, right? Like as a coach and stuff, like how do I decide if I'm going to tell so and so or not? Well, first of all, like it's, am I going to tell anyone, right? But I feel like once you get past that barrier of like, yes, I'm going to tell some people, then it's like exactly like you said, like who's in that group, like who's in that circle of people that I'm going to tell. And I am very much like you in that I I don't know, I feel like I lived so much of my younger years being like so concerned about what other people thought of me. Definitely was a perfect, like through college and stuff, was definitely a perfectionist, wanted to like be seen as like the model student, the model girlfriend, the model daughter, right? Like all these things. And then you get to a point where it's like, wait, what if I'm not happy with that? Like, am I really just going to go the whole rest of my life trying to like do what I think other people think I should do? So for me with polyamory, I mean, my husband and I talked about it like in the beginning, like at first, and I do recommend this to people, like at first, when you're first exploring and like aren't 100% sure yet, like what this might look like for you, it's hard to know what to even tell people, right? Like you could basically just say like, we're exploring polyamory, right? Or we're exploring non-monogamy or whatever, but they're going to have a ton of questions likely, and you may not know how to answer them. So like in the beginning, we kind of just picked a list of like safe people. Like we each picked like 2 or 3 family or close friends that we were like, we feel like this person like will do okay with this for the most part. And then like it grew from there ongoing, but yeah, it's hard. People ask a lot like, how do I tell people? And I think the reality is, whoever you're telling, whatever response you think you're going to get, there is always a chance that that's not what you're going to get, right? Like both on the positive and negative side. There could be a person you're like, oh, this is going to be horrible. Like they're not going to like, this is not going to be their jam. And you tell them and they're kind of like, you do you about it. And then there's sometimes where you really think that someone's going to take it well and they're super caught off guard and like don't know what to say, right? So I always tell folks like when you're thinking about who to tell, just make sure that you, as you an individual, can be as open to any form of reaction as you can, right? Like if people have a negative reaction, it's not going to feel good to anyone ever, and that's okay. just recognize that like that can happen. And it's really about deciding like, what is it worth to you, right? Like, what is it worth to you to be authentic? For me personally, and it sounds like for you, honestly, like in general in life, it's worth it to be authentic. I personally would rather people know, and I'll deal with like, I'll cry, I'll be angry, I'll whatever, but I'd personally rather be open and deal with whatever comes. Not everyone is like that, and that's okay. My husband isn't particularly like that, so we've kind of like treaded those waters in terms of like, he didn't tell his like close family until much more recently, and we've been at this for like 2.5 years now. So I think it's like, it's hard because there's no exact answer, but you have to be prepared that people could have any manner of reaction.
Okay. And if the reaction is negative, is there anything that people can say to help diffuse the situation, to make people understand? I'm just trying to think about all these people that
Yeah.
are trying to navigate it, and they get that bad reaction,
Yeah.
and then they're just like, oh shit, I have to defend myself now.
Yeah. 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 And it's hard. I think you absolutely can and should defend yourself if that's what feels like aligned to you. Like if you want to, whomever you're telling, right? If you want to say, okay, like, I understand that this is a foreign concept to you, or I understand that this is really like, it seems like you feel like this is coming out of left field. Would it be okay if I gave you a little bit of like background, right? I think, and everyone's different in like how much what do you call, like how much permission do you want to ask for, right? Versus just being like, listen, here's the deal, right? So I think there's some measure in which you can say like, look, I recognize based on like your facial expression, your body language, the fact that you're either not saying anything or you're raising your voice, that this is really like hitting you in some kind of way. Do you have questions that I can answer? Or what are your major concerns? Maybe I can assuage them, right? And the other thing I tell, I just actually did this recently with my husband's family, is to say, when you get something like, I don't get it, I don't understand, why would you this, that, and the other? Part of my response for them and for myself is, that's okay. I'm not asking you to understand. You don't have to get it to the point where you're like, oh, this is something I could see for my life, or this is something like I get 100%. That's okay. I'm not asking you to get it. All I'm asking you to do is hear me, because I'm sharing something important with you. And we are 2 people, 3 people, whatever, that care about each other. And so I wanted you to know something about like the real authentic me. I'm not asking you to like, because that's reality, right? Like, we're adults. We're not asking for permission. We're not asking for someone to say, okay, go ahead and do that, right? We can do what we want anyway, as long as everyone we're connected to is aware and consenting adults, right? So yeah, I mean, I think, and I do think that's useful to think about before, like, if this goes downhill, what will I do? Am I gonna end the conversation? Am I gonna walk away? Am I going to say, we don't have to talk about this anymore. I just wanted to give you that level of information so you knew, like, what is it that feels right to you, depending on who it is you're talking to, right? Like, you might feel differently with your parent versus like your next door neighbor, right? In terms of like how far you're willing to go.
Yeah. And so other people that you have to tell, right, are the people that you are potentially dating.
Yeah.
So when does that happen? How do you do it? What's the correct time?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole thing, right? So I think dating apps are a blessing and a curse, right? Because like they're not super fun all the time. And you can write that stuff right up front. Like, you do not need to. So I always advocate for people, if you're on a dating app, just please put it in your bio. I understand how terrifying that is. And the reality is, you don't want to match with anyone that isn't cool with this, right? Like, you don't really. It would feel good. It might be an ego boost. You might have a great conversation. But if at the end of the day, you're going to feel rejected anyway, that's not going to feel good, right? So that's why I say, like, they're a blessing and a curse, because it's like, it's hard sometimes to like put that stuff out in writing, but it's good in that, like, people, now we're assuming that people read dating app bios, which is not accurate at all.
Which I was just gonna say, like, I have met so many people that there have been so many things in my bio that I'm vegan, that I'm this, that I'm that, and then like speak to them and they're like, let's go out for steak. Like,
and you're like,
what?
did you not like, do you? Yeah, no, it's happened. I would say it's happened more to my husband than me, but for sure, like, in the beginning, like, he is upfront. He has a wedding photo of us as one of his photos, and still people would match with him. And then later on down the line, this would come up, right? So he switched to eventually just like pretty closely up front saying like, hey, like, so great to like meet you or whatever. Since you match with me, I assume you read my bio and you're aware that I'm polyamorous. And so many times women just unmatch him without saying anything, which, like, whatever, it's fine. We all ghost people. I get it. But like, just read just read a little bit.
Well,
Or just
I
spread
do like
pictures.
that. Yeah, I actually thought it was going to be the opposite, that you were going to tell me that it happens to you more often, because I feel like most of the men I know don't read bios. Like,
Yeah.
I remember when I met my husband, like, he did read my bio, but he would always tell me like, "Oh yeah, dating apps are just a game. Like, you just swipe on
Yeah.
everybody, and then
Yeah.
whoever matches with you, then." And I was just like, I have never done that.
No.
Why would you swipe on everyone without reading what
I
they're
don't
about
want to talk
first?
to someone
But
that I'm not interested in or like compatible at all with. You know, though, now that you're saying that, I wonder, like, is it really that these women matching with my husband aren't reading the bio? Or is it this, like, I do think that there is, to an extent, I do think it is harder. This is a broad brushstroke, but like, I think it is harder in my experience for men in polyamory to find people because of this whole like married man syndrome thing. For some reason, there seems to be less weirdness around married woman. Now, is that a good thing? Not necessarily, because does that mean that like the men that I was matching with are just like, who cares if she's married? You know, like, I don't know. And to be fair, like, in the beginning, I think I said this last time, I forget, we were opening up so I could date women. So I was only dating women in the beginning. And so like, there was none of this weird gendered stuff. But yeah, I think he's definitely gotten, like, he matched with someone once that I happened to go to high school with. I have no idea how that happened because we're not in the same area I grew up in at all. But she messaged me on Facebook and was like, hey, it seems all above board. Like, he's got a wedding photo on there, but like, I know you, so I just want to make sure. And I'm like, no, girl, it's all good. And in fact, I'd be more comfortable if you dated someone that I already kind of knew and was a good, you know, like, it's fine. But I think there's this, like, I don't know. I don't know if it's like women who are matching with men assume that maybe they're not telling the truth about being in an open relationship. I don't know. And of course, like, this is very hetero, like the way I'm talking about it. Of course, there's tons of scenarios where this isn't even a thing, right? But yeah, I don't know. There is something though about the whole like male thing that makes it harder in some ways for men. So, you know, who knows? So like, dating apps are like easier in a way because you can like front that information versus like, you know, connecting with someone kind of organically out in the real world. But yeah, I always tell people, I know it's so awkward. And it is better for everyone if you just do this up front. Like, it just is.
Yeah.
I totally get if people like are talking to someone and they want to, like, not from an app or whatever, you get someone's number and you're talking and you want to wait till you're in person. I get that. Like, you do you. But I think the reality is, like, it's not, one, it's not kind to that other person, right? To not be upfront. And two, it's not kind to yourself, because you don't deserve to then sit in front of someone who's potentially going to judge you, right? Because there's all manner of responses. Like, you could just get, hey, like, that's cool for you, like, love that for you, and that's not for me. Or you could get, like, you cheating, whatever colorful words, right? Like, that's not fair to you to get that response. So yeah, and then there's the question of, like, what do I say, right? I always and I mean, I always encourage people to just say it as if it's not a big deal. Like, I was just describing talking to that couple, and I said, like, my husband and my other partner are blah, 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 right? Like, I'm not being weird about the fact that I have another partner. It's okay to just say, like, hey, you know, like, while we're getting to know each other, I practice relationships non-monogamously. What about you? And you might get questions. They may be like, what does that mean? You know, and so there's, you know, but I don't necessarily think we need to treat this as like okay, so I have to tell you something, but I don't want you to freak out, right? Because then that just made people freak out. So yeah, I think just like stating it as like, this is part of me, it's usually the best way to go. And you're going to get rejection. You're going to get opinions. You're going to get all that stuff, right? It happens.
Yeah. And so let's say, because some people are just not about dating apps, right?
Very true.
So
I don't blame
how
them.
else? Yeah, I know. It's so funny because I also use, like, I use Bumble BFF, which is
like
like
the friend. Yeah.
like like Bumble dating, except everything you hated about online dating now for friends.
Yeah.
Which is conversations that go nowhere, endless talking, never meeting, making like plans with people who don't show up.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people just don't want to meet anybody on an app anymore, just because they're just so sick and tired and it feels like a full-time job. What would you tell people that are in that boat and still trying to do this?
Yeah, it's hard. I think that there are a lot of online communities that are not apps, right? Just like Facebook groups or on Meetup or Reddit, right? The hard part of that, although I guess this isn't that different from dating apps, it's hard to like know what's legit, right? Like, it's hard to know, like, okay, there's this Facebook group I'm in and they're like doing like, for example, what was it, July 15th was non-monogamy day of visibility, the first annual one. So there were like tons of cities in the US and abroad that were doing like these like meetup events for non-monogamous folks. So like that seems very legit because there's like a nonprofit spearheading all this, right? But then you get like, I'm in one Facebook group that I think is like Pennsylvania and New Jersey polyamory events or whatever. And like, they are very legit, but like, you don't know that going in, right? So I definitely think there are like meetup type groups online. Also in general, whether you are necessarily in the queer community or not, there is a lot of overlap between the non-monog and queer community. So sometimes in like those kind of spaces, you find folks in this community. It's hard. It's very hard to meet someone like super organically that is already non-monogamous. I definitely have had like clients and friends that meet someone organically, right? Like out at a bar or at an event or whatever, a concert. And they end up being okay with the fact that this person is non-monogamous, but they themselves were not to begin with. And that can work, right? Like there are people out there that just, they don't know what they don't know, or they've never really like explored this before, but they jump on board and do the education and figure it out. But yeah, it's hard. And in addition, I get a lot of people saying like, when you live in like a rural or conservative or like smaller area, I'm from the Poconos in northeastern Pennsylvania, super red, super like, not big population. I can't imagine trying to organically meet someone who is okay with this in that environment.
Yeah.
So it's hard. I do not, as much as it's funny, as much as like, people say to me like, oh, you're already married, you did the hard dating thing, why would you want to try again? As much as I'm like, it's fine, now that I like feel pretty good with my two partners and I'm like not looking to date right now, I'm like, oh, thank God I don't have to date, right? Like it's just like there's so much that like goes into it. And it is hard. I do always tell people like, please like try your best not to give up, but I do understand that like that's easy for me to say.
Yeah.
And it's not always that easy in reality.
Yeah. And let's say that people do end up wanting to go to like a meetup of some kind. I know that a lot of people, myself included, feel like safety is an issue
Yeah.
when I go to meet people, just in general, whether it's on Bumble BFF or like through a Facebook group or any other way. Um, what are some things that you can do to make sure that you stay safe?
Yeah, definitely always, 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 always meet in a public place, right? I would suggest like honestly the first 3 times. I actually met my husband on Tinder a long time ago. So I did the same thing with him, completely in like a monogamous context. So definitely meet in a public place. Definitely make sure that someone knows the name of the person that you're meeting and potentially even share a photo or whatever, or where you know them from, or their phone number if you have it, just to like make sure. I also, when I would go on first dates when I was a little bit younger and like really not sure and kind of worried, I would go sometimes to like even to like Starbucks, and I quite literally would tell the barista, hey, like I would find like a younger, woman and say like, hey, just giving you a heads up, like I'm on a first date here. If you could just like, keep your eye out, like, that
Yeah.
would be great, right? And I think, it sucks that that's the reality, and you have to keep yourself safe, right? Like you said, regardless of whether it's a romantic date or just meeting someone from like Bumble BFF, like we have to be aware that the internet is a strange place and there are weird people that have all kinds of motives, and we'd like to assume that that's not the case, but it happens, right? So yeah, definitely always like meeting in a public place, and I don't think there's nothing to like apologize for there, right? Like if someone is like insistent that you meet them like at their house or something, like you don't have to be okay with that. Like it's okay to set boundaries, even if you're pretty sure that this person is fine. It's okay to set personal boundaries and follow through with them and not let people like bulldoze your boundaries.
Yeah. And then I'd love to add like two things to that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, one is I when I was dating, I I had my location shared. I actually still
Yeah.
have my location shared with like two people that I knew, and I would let them know before I went on a date, like, hey, I'm going on a date with this and this person, like you said. Like I'd send them a picture and maybe a name and like just kind of like check in with me through the night, just open the maps and look at my location and just make sure I'm in like a normal kind of area.
Yeah, make sure I'm not like in another state suddenly or like
Right.
super
Or
far
like
away.
in a, I don't know, in like a big field or something.
Yeah. Make sure I
Yeah.
look
And
like
then,
I'm in civilization.
right, like by, like in a neighborhood, preferably in a public place, in a restaurant or something. And then the other thing is, which I feel like, especially, I see this more with women, is don't feel like you have to stay. If something feels off, or like it's for me, it's a gut feeling, right? If like whether whoever I meet, it's a gut feeling. If something feels off, I do not feel obligated to stay in that situation. And I don't make any excuses. I don't say anything. I can like legit just say, I've got to go. Make sure that you've brought your own car there, or you can Uber or something else, but just say, I've got to go and walk out.
Yep. Absolutely. We do not need to make any excuses. We don't need it's just we just don't. I mean, and you're right. I think for the most part, like this does apply to women and female identifying individuals and femmes, like, and it doesn't matter. Like, whatever. If you are out with someone and you get this gut feeling that is like, I don't know about this person, right? Doesn't matter who it is. If it's a guy, it doesn't matter. Just leave. Just get, if you have to, like you said, like say you have to go to the restroom and hit that Uber button and stay in there until they're like 1 minute away. Go back to the table and say, I've got to go, walk out the door. We don't need to, like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? The worst thing that's going to happen is somehow your gut feeling was wrong and they're a good person, whatever, and you find that out later. Fine, whatever. We don't need to play those games. Like, that is not, it is not worth that. It is not worth your pride, feeling embarrassed, whatever. Like, it's just not. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you.
Yeah,
For
I
sure.
find that it's always like this feeling of like I have to be nice,
Yeah.
which we are adults and it's good to be nice, but you don't
Yeah.
have to be nice all the time, and
No.
you definitely don't have to be nice if it goes against you,
Yes.
right?
If you
And
feel
so
like
just
something's wrong,
being
it probably is. Like, just, and like, again, like, what's the worst case scenario? That your gut feeling was wrong? Like, wouldn't you rather that than not do something and be right? Like, let's not do that. And again, I mean, none of this whatsoever to like victim shame anyone who has been caught into a situation. Sometimes we do not get a feeling. Sometimes the person is like seemingly the nicest, most normal individual. Things happen. And sometimes we get scared and we don't leave. And I never would want to like suggest that someone, like, it's your fault because you didn't leave. But like, if you get that and you feel like you want to leave, please, like, hear us telling you like it's okay to do that. We do not have to be nice. We do not have to care about the other person's feelings at that point. Like, it's not worth it. It's not.
yeah. And let's say, okay, so now let's say that did happen, right? You got into a situation, maybe because this can also happen where it just went past your boundaries, or, things happen that you weren't comfortable with. How do you go forward from there?
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends, right? Like, if you want to see this person again, but boundaries were crossed, right? Like, I'm cool with you, but I wasn't comfortable with this thing that happened. Um, Again, like, no one needs to apologize or just because you gave consent for something once does not mean that that's a blanket invitation. That's not how this works. Like you said, we're adults, right? Like, you can change your mind at any time for any reason. And the reality is, and I know sometimes this is hard because it doesn't always happen this way, but the reality is that the right person, not like the one, like that kind of, but a good person will want your consent for everything, no matter how many times. Like, I can't tell you like the number of times like my partners have said like, is this okay? Can I, whatever, like the right kind of people will want that. They don't want to guess or assume, is this within your boundaries or not? And I think that's part of like us all learning like language, because we don't do a great job of like teaching how to communicate and how to ask about these things. But the language is there. It's out there. People understand in general that consent is necessary, right? So I mean, I think if you can do that, right? You can say to someone like, hey, I was reflecting back on our time together. I really enjoyed getting to know you, and this particular thing was out of my comfort zone, and I didn't see that in the moment, but I'm saying it now, right?
Yeah.
That's all you have to say, right? And if you don't want to see them again, and same thing with the like, we don't have to play nice. As long as you're not being like outwardly rude for absolutely no reason, you can absolutely say like, thanks so much. I think we'll leave it at that. Like, I'm not interested in progressive or whatever it is, but yeah, I think there's a lot around this, like being a good person, being a good girl, right? Like being nice, being accommodating, like all that kind of stuff. And like, that's just societal messaging, right? Saying like, well, people don't like people who blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, maybe that's not my type of people then. Like, if they're not going to be cool with me having and asserting and standing by my own boundaries, then guess that's not for me. And that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. And just being understanding what happened, and like understanding, hey, that wasn't good for me, and being upfront with yourself about that.
Yeah.
I think is really important, and just moving on from there, right?
Yeah.
Whatever steps you need to take going forward, but allowing yourself grace also for what happened.
Yeah. And you're learning about, and this is why, like, when I do like coaching for non-monog folks, like the whole first part of my coaching program is about your relationship with yourself, because that is the most important part. How do you talk to yourself? How do you talk to yourself when you feel like you're doing well in life? And how do you talk to yourself when you feel like you're not doing so well? Do you call yourself a failure? Do you tell yourself that you like, come on now, Jess, you're better than that? Like, what language we are in our heads so much more of the time speaking to ourselves than we ever speak to someone else. So like, to quite literally, like, if we're going to go out and try to meet other people where they're at, we have to meet ourselves where we're at. Like, what if you have some kind of experience and you realize after the fact that like, I thought that would be fine and it wasn't? That's absolutely fine. That's actually a beautiful thing, I would argue, like to have that level of self-insight and think to yourself like, that is not what I thought that would feel like. It didn't feel good to me, right? And I think that does really come up so much in non-monogamy. And I think in some respects, like it really does come up in like, the swinging community, the open relationship community, where people think like, I want to have a threesome, or I want to do this particular thing. And then they do the thing and it's like, wow, I don't think I liked that. Like, that didn't feel good to me, or that didn't feel how I thought it would. Or maybe that person in particular is like not a great play partner. Like, that's not, they're not for me. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think we just get so it's so easy to be negative toward ourselves because we're not hearing ourselves say it out loud. It's just going on in here, right? And if we said the things out loud, and I do this with people sometimes, have them practice this way. If you looked yourself in the mirror and you said what you say to yourself inside your head, it's going to feel different because you're going to realize, like, wow, I am really not nice to myself, right? And like, if you think about, like, would you let someone else speak to a friend of yours that way? Absolutely not. You would look at them and be like, what is your problem? Stop talking to them like that. They don't deserve that. So what? They made a mistake. They changed their mind. That's human, right? So I think, I think absolutely, like, it's so important to, and like I said, this is why I start with this. Like, even before I ever get to talking with folks about like relationship agreements and conflict resolution with a partner, all that stuff, we go through, like, how do you speak to yourself, self-kindness, the voice in your head, and how to like reframe those thoughts. And then also, what are your personal boundaries? Boundaries are things we make for ourselves. It's the fence you put around yourself. That has nothing to do with other people. Those are things you control. Before we even get to like, but what about this then? Like, no, we need to back up and we need to focus on you, because at the end of the day, you will always have you. You are quite literally stuck with yourself. So let's look at that relationship internally, and like, what does it take for you to be honest with yourself, to then be honest with other people and say, I didn't like that. That didn't feel good to me. I don't think I want to do that again. Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. That it's not this, I think it's easy from like societal messaging and all that crap to like feel like, oh, but I'm jerking their chain, or I'm being aloof or confusing or whatever. No, you're just being human. Being human is confusing. It's okay. Like, life is hard. So give yourself that. Like, give yourself that space. It's okay.
Yeah. And so another thing that I realized that a lot of people watching this, I heard you say play partner, and
Okay.
that feels like terminology that people should understand what it means. So what are some different terminologies or things that what are things called,
Yeah.
so that people understand what we're talking about,
Yeah.
and also when they encounter things like on a profile and maybe they're not down with that.
They're like,
So,
yeah.
right, like,
There are so many words, and words mean things. I'm all about language, and like, there's so many, right? So in like the non-monogamy community in general, you'll see ENM, ethical non-monogamy. I personally no longer use the word ethical for a variety of reasons, but you'll see that. So if you see ENM or CNM, consensual non-monogamy, that is this like community at large we're talking about. So a play partner, when I'm saying play partner, what I usually say is partner or play partner, right? Because I want to not narrow in on people who just practice like a form of polyamory in which they're forming emotional, more relational type connections with people. Not everyone who's non-monogamous practices polyamory. That's totally cool. So when I say play partner, I mean a person that you have some form of sexual relationship with, or it could also mean someone that you have a like a BDSM partner that may or may not always include sex. BDSM doesn't always include sex, so in the traditional way that we think of it. So I'm just distinguishing between like, this can happen if you're like a person who has multiple connections or relationships, emotionally, partners, or play partners, meaning people you just meet up with for different kinds of sexual experiences. So yeah, thank you for that. That's a good point. What else? So yeah, there's so many. So another word that you might hear a lot is metamor. So a metamor is your partner's partner. So my husband has a girlfriend. So my husband's girlfriend would be my metamor. And my So I'm in a what we call a V relationship where I'm at the bottom here, husband, partner. So my husband has another partner. That's my metamor. My other partner does not. I'm currently his only partner, though it's open and available to him at any time if he wanted to. But my husband and my other partner are each other's metamors, right? Because I'm their partner's partner. So that's another word that gets thrown around a lot. Also gets abbreviated to metas. So that's one that you'll see thrown around. Like if you're hanging out in like Facebook or Reddit or whatever, you'll see that a lot. Nesting partner is another one. So within the umbrella, there's so many umbrellas. It's like non-monogamy is like the big umbrella. Then there's like open relationship, swinging, polyamory, relationship anarchy. But then under that, there can be more. So like under the mini polyamory umbrella, there's a bunch of different kinds of polyamory. And so one can have what's called hierarchical polyamory or non-hierarchical polyamory. There's a lot of, I'll say, hierarchical polyamory gets shit on a lot, to be frank, in the community. I personally don't understand. I don't understand this in the queer community either, of which I am part of both. So I'm speaking from my experience. Like, I don't get the like shaming certain groups of the community, like the bisexuality erasure that happens in the queer community sometimes. And then there's a lot of folks who like are very, very against hierarchical polyamory, meaning that a person views someone as like their primary partner and other partners as secondary, meaning certain decisions might be made to support the primary partner, even at the expense of secondary partners, depending on, and at the expense doesn't mean like some horrible thing, right? But it could mean like if I were hierarchical and my husband was having a really, really, really stressful day and I was supposed to have a date, I might cancel that date to show up for my primary partner. I personally, as a individual coach, etc., I believe that hierarchy can be done well and healthily. We just have to like talk about it and like have boundaries and relationship agreements. Non-hierarchical means that you kind of view everyone on the same like kind of playing field. And so within either, so in hierarchical, typically if I were hierarchical polyamorous, I would call my husband my primary partner. I'm non-hierarchical, so I call my husband my nesting partner because I live with him. That's really the only distinction between he and my other partner, but it is real, right? Like I can't ignore the fact that I live with him and not my other partner. So right. A nesting partner is someone that you live with. That's another term.
And I just wanted to say hi to Nicole if you're watching this. She said, hi, excited to tune in. So I can imagine that, so Nicole just said, I've had healthy hierarchical relationships. My favorite quote is equity, not equality.
Absolutely. And that's the big thing is it's very easy to get behind this idea of like fairness and equating fairness with equality, meaning everyone gets exactly the same. And that's just not true. It's really not true in life in general. Even when we're talking about like equality, like in other kind of contexts, really what we mean is equity, which means everyone is getting their needs met in the way they need to be met. It doesn't mean everyone gets exactly the same. So yeah, it absolutely, I personally and professionally do not believe that all hierarchical relationships are bad.
Yeah, and it has to be, just in general in life, you have different relationships with different people in any aspect of your life, and no two relationships will ever be exactly the same. And so I guess meeting them where they're at and having that relationship be based on that relationship rather than having it be based on what every relationship gets.
Right. And if you're getting what you need, what makes you feel happy, fulfilled, all of those good things, why does it matter what someone else is getting? Right? Like you're saying, like in friendships, right? If I have X number of who I consider close friends, and one of those close friends I text every day, and one of those close friends I don't text very much at all, but we all feel fine with that. And no, this friend isn't feeling like, oh, I wish you would text me. Like, if you say that, then I probably would do that, right? So it's not about this like one for one, right? And I also want to say, like, I completely get where that comes from. That's what we're taught, right? So when folks start in non-monogamy, a lot of times people will say to me, like, when I ask about like what are their relationship agreements, some people will say like, oh, well, we have an agreement where I won't go out on dates with anyone if my OG, I just call it original because it's no hierarchy implied, my OG partner also has a date that night. I get why you are doing that, because there's this illusion that that's going to keep things like safe and secure and keep people happy. And it's completely unrealistic, right? Like, that's not how time works. Have you ever tried to create a meeting with 3 other people at work? You all work in the same place and you can't figure it out, right? So I understand that, like, all of what we've been taught our whole lives about what relationships should look like and what's like healthy and good and right and all of that stuff, what it means to be someone's priority. We've been taught all this stuff, and it's hard to detox that stuff. So I get where people are coming from when they're trying to do this like equality thing, but in reality, that's not what matters. What matters is that people are feeling fulfilled and happy and content and getting what they need, not that they're getting what everyone else is getting.
Yeah. It just reminds me of a lesson that I heard of that a teacher did in class. And she gave every single kid in the classroom Band-Aids. And then she told every single kid what they had. They were like, you have a cut. You have a sprained ankle. You have, you hurt your shoulder. You fell down and you have a bruise. And she's like, you all got the same thing. That's equality. But did you all get what you needed for what happened to you? And that was kind of
that's
how she showed.
Example. Yeah, because like that person with a bruise doesn't need a Band-Aid at all. Actually, but they do need
the person
ice.
that sprained their ankle. Exactly. This person that sprained their ankle doesn't need a Band-Aid. No. They all got equal stuff, right? They all got that same Band-Aid. But did it help them in the same way? No. The only person that really needed a Band-Aid was the person who got a cut.
Yeah, no, that's, oh, I love that. I'm totally going to steal that in the future. That's such a good way to explain it though, right? Is like, what good does it do us to give everyone equal, like, and it's so easy to obsess about because it's what we're again, it's what we're taught. Like, I think I come on podcasts and I talk, and I think people sometimes might hear me and be like, oh, she's got it all figured out. I promise you I do not. But like, there are times where it literally occurs to me in my mind, right? Well, I spent X number of nights with my husband and only X number of nights with my other they don't care. And guess what? If they do, if they're feeling slighted in some way, or like they'd like more time with me or whatever, they can open their mouth and say that. I don't have to be responsible for all of their feelings and my own. And also, I cannot be responsible for their feelings, right? And that was, when people ask, like, what's been the hardest part for you? For me, as like a fairly anxious individual in general, in the beginning, that was completely the hardest thing for me, is like, I did think a lot in terms of equality, and like, I live with this person. Like, we started out hierarchical and we moved to non-hierarchical. And so when we did that, I just kept thinking, like, how can we be non-hierarchical if I spent X number of nights sleeping with you and X number, right? But my partner, my non-nesting partner, said, I don't feel any kind, like, I came into this relationship knowing that you lived with your husband. Like, it's not a surprise to me. Like, it's okay. And, some weeks we get more nights together and some weeks we don't. And that's okay. and I'm fine. And if I feel differently, I will tell you, right? But it's so easy to get caught up in that, like, but, am I hurting? People just need what they need. They don't necessarily need what other people need. Everyone's different. And I think that's a big part of the beauty of non-monogamy, is that, like, people need different things and they can get different needs met with different people. It doesn't have to be this, like, pressure all the time. But it's hard. It's
Right. Or
hard in the beginning.
one person having to be everything for
Yes.
you.
Yes. And
And
again,
that's why we have other relationships in our
right.
lives. That's why we have friendships and
Right.
and therapists. And
Exactly.
because one person cannot be everything to you.
Yeah. It's
And
not
so it just
possible. And that's not a good, right? Like, we would not tell someone to, like, go pick one human, go to a cabin in the woods, and never speak to another human again. That wouldn't go well, right? Like, we're not made for that. That doesn't mean that I'm hating on monogamy. I was monogamous my whole entire life until a couple of years ago, right? If you find that with your partner and your friends and whoever else is in your life, you feel completely content, happy, and fulfilled, do that. Awesome. Like, great for you. And we don't have to hate on people who choose otherwise. You know, I'm not trying to convert people. I just want different relationship structures to be seen as equally valid. That's all. So yeah, no, I think it's a lot of pressure to think about being someone's absolutely everything and being, you know, fulfilling all of their needs. And, like, does it take away from the whole, like, you mean everything to me thing? No, I tell both my partners that all the time. You mean everything to me. Like, they do. It's just, I don't have to expect you individually to fulfill every single need of mine. Also, I can fulfill some of my own needs too. So, like, we don't need to put that all on other people.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing to realize just in general as humans, as adults, that we can speak up. And it's okay to do that. And it's okay to tell people what it is that you want, what it is that you need. I was having a conversation actually with Nicole recently, which we were talking about. I don't expect someone to ask me how things are, right? Because we have that generic, how are you? What's going on? With, like, my real friends, you know, or I won't say real friends, but, like, with the people that I share things with, I don't need them to ask me those questions. I'm going to go ahead and tell them what's going on in my life. And I think that we need to open that up a little bit more, because we have this idea that someone is supposed to ask about you and then you're supposed to give them a response like fine.
Yes.
Or maybe add a little bit more. But we can make it bigger than that. We don't have to live in this world where we're always just at this, right? We can just open up and be vulnerable with people, and we can open up and talk about what's going on actually in our lives. And we would have more fulfilling relationships if we just allowed ourselves to do that.
Yeah, 100% agree. I've always been that person, and it hasn't always been accepted. And I think, you know, like, then we get into this, like, this idea of, like, you're a lot, right? Like, or you're too much. And quite honestly, I mean, I did not make this up. I've seen this a lot of places, but, like, my feeling at this point in my life is, like, listen, I know I'm a lot. You think I don't know that? Like, I am very aware that I am a lot. And if you don't like that, go find less. That's fine. Not less, like, less important or less awesome or less what. Just, if you want a certain type of person that isn't complex or complicated, that's fine. That's just not me. That's okay.
Yeah.
I love those people. Like, it's fine. You are entitled to be exactly who you are without freaking apologizing for it all the time. I'm so over, like, apologize. Like, what good does it do me to apologize for who I am? Am I going to change? No. Are there things that I even could change? Some, but not all. So I might as well just embrace that, right? And like find the people who will go there with me, right? Like find the people who will be that. I mean, my best friend in the whole world, we've been best friends for 12 years now. She says all the time, she's just like, you always have something new for me to learn. You always keep me on my toes. You are not predictable. And like she's absolutely right, and I absolutely love her for that because she gets that. She sees that. Is it always comfy? No. When I first told her about this whole like polyamory thing, she was like, "Huh?" And that's a totally like reasonable response to someone you have known for 11 years, right? But she accepts me as I am, even though it's sometimes going to be weird or like whatever outside the box. That's okay. And you just have to find your people. You don't have to make yourself small just to fit in other people's boxes.
Yeah. So Nicole is saying, Sigh, I recently de-escalated my relationship with my girlfriend. That was my first poly de-escalation versus monogamous breakups. It was pretty different for sure.
Yeah.
Is there any advice that you could give Nicole or anyone who gets into a relationship that then has to like realizes it's not perfect for them, it doesn't make sense for their life? What can they do?
Yeah, I think I really love that you brought that up, Nicole, because I think with the concept of mononormativity, right, which is the idea that monogamy is like the way, the best, the like norm, whatever. The examples of breakups that we see are you break up and you never speak again, right? Or you break up and you speak again and it turns out horribly and you should not have spoken again, right? Like every movie ever, right? All that kind of stuff. And so I think the like concept of de-escalation is a very different one, right? So like when we're talking about de-escalation, we're saying like, okay, you and I are at this point. We have this level of entanglement. We have this level of emotional connectivity. We have this level of, thanks, Nicole. We have this level, she said, yes. We have this level of like involvement in each other's lives, whether that's like with friends or family or work or whatever. We don't have to just cut all that off. It's not, you don't have to do that. It's actually not required, right? Like nobody can tell you how to break up. You just do whatever works for you, right? So I love the idea of de-escalation in general because we can say like, okay, I like, if this ever happened with my husband, for example, and in the beginning, we talked about this. I said to him when I started dating women, what if I'm a lesbian? What if I start dating women and I'm like, shoot, I've been doing it wrong the whole time and I don't think I'm attracted to men or what, right? We talked about that and I have no way to know that this is what it would have played out. But he said the most beautiful thing, which is like, you are my life partner. You are a person I want my home with. I want dogs with. I want kids, all that stuff. If you decide that you are not romantically or sexually interested in me anymore because you are only into women, then we will de-escalate in that, like, we will disentangle romantically and sexually and decide what like living arrangement makes sense, right? All that kind of stuff, right? Like, does it make sense to live together? Should we get like a multi-family home where like we can still have our kids, our dogs, whatever, and whatever that looks like, right? And I love everything Nicole's saying right now. Like we just have these like,
sorry, I just had to like put it up there because I
no,
know you're talking and I'm just like,
no, you're fine.
We'll get to it.
You're right. We just have these habits in monogamy of like, when you break up, you must do XYZ, right? You have to like never talk again. You have to unfollow each other on all social media. You best not be looking at their profile again, right? All these things. And like, if that's what you need, monogamy or non-monogamy, then please do that. Like, if it is hard for you to keep looking at their profile for whatever reason, then yeah, don't torture yourself, or just do that little like snooze them for 30 days thing and see how you feel. Like, but we don't have to. There's no like prescription for how to de-escalate something from a we're at this point and we're X amount of entangled and we're going to come down. We can choose not to live with people that we've been living with. We can choose to still live with people but live like have separate bedrooms and have more different partners. Like, there's so many ways that we can do this, and I think it really comes down to like having the conversation of like, what about our relationship? Because a relationship is a relationship is a relationship, right? We have relationships with coworkers. I have a relationship with my male woman. I love her. She's great. What about this relationship works for you? And what about this relationship feels kind of meh? Like, you could do without it, or it's like not feeling so great, right? Like, okay, cool. Like, here's a novel idea. Let's keep the things that work and let's get rid of the things that don't work. So if you want to live together, be roommates, housemates, whatever, platonic life partners, etc., then do those things. You know, are people going to look at you funny? Absolutely. They will. People will be like, what are you doing? What are you doing? But it's not their life, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not their life. It's your life. And, you know, I think I really don't, you know, I worked in end of life for a while in the beginning of my career. And I don't think anyone gets to the end of their life and is like, you know, I wish I would have cared what other people thought more.
Yeah.
Nobody does that. Nobody does that. People almost always say they wish they did the things that made them happy.
Yeah.
So don't wait that long. We don't have to.
I love that. And so we are at an hour and 12 minutes already. So I'm like, oh no,
I am
we've like gone way over. So I'll probably try to convince you to come on for a third episode.
already convinced. You're fine.
But I want you to get a chance to tell people how they can reach out to you
Oh
and
yeah, I do that.
to join your group. I know that you have a Facebook group,
Yeah.
and I want people to know how to get in touch with you if this
Yeah.
is something that they're interested in.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Sometimes I like get on a roll and then I forget like also I, you know, do this for a job. I get like righteously indignant and I'm like, just be yourself. So yeah, so hi, I'm Jess. I'm a non-monogamous relationship coach. You heard that already. I love what I do. If you couldn't tell, I'm pretty passionate about it. I have a Facebook group. It is private, so nobody will see that you join it. I know that's a concern for a lot of folks in the non-monog community. It's called Non-Monogamous Newbies. You will find it, I promise. There's also a lovely picture of my face because you have to do that. Hate it, but you have to. So Non-Monogamous Newbies on Facebook. Tons of free info in there. I go live every week. There's probably like over like 6-7 hours of recorded like stuff from that. I have freebies that I give out around like relationship agreements, some other detoxing monogamous thinking, which is really hard and big part of this as we've been talking about it. So that's there. I'm also on Instagram, same non-monogamous _newbies. You can follow me there. And I also have a website now, yay, which I think is new since last I was on. So it's the name of my coaching biz. So it's www.bothandcoaching.com, BOTHAND coaching.com. There's info on there about my 12-week coaching, signature coaching program, also called Non-Monogamous Newbies, as well as some other stuff. And I can customize things for people. Really my like main goal and passion is like, there are people, and I love these people, but there are not a ton of people talking about this stuff, which is why I love that you're doing this. And you know, I love that people are here to learn about these things, because even if it's not you and you want to do this with your life, there's so much to learn, I think, from just having conversations about different things and different ways of being. So that is my whole goal, is to just try to, you know, increase the narrative, decrease the stigma, all that kind of stuff, and just, you know, I don't know, have people be who they are or something.
Awesome. Yay. Thank you so much,
You're
Jess.
so
And
welcome. Thank you.
I'm so excited. We'll do part 3.
For sure.
Nicole is also excited for part 3.
I love you, Nicole. I don't know you, but I love you. Thank you.
So thank you so much for tuning in. If you are listening to this, if you listen to it live or you're listening to it on the replay, please make sure to like, subscribe, share this with somebody that you think needs to hear it. I think just learning about all different kinds of being will help us be better people in general and just more tolerable of all types of relationships, all types of people. And I want to make sure that we put a face to people, to different groups. And so please make sure to do your part and help me spread this message. I will see everyone else next week for a different episode of the Galit Speaks podcast. Thank you so much, Jess.
Thank you.